Okay, so today we're going to do a little review of the very basic of document setup and a little look at the organization panel and sort of how you navigate around there and deal with it. So when you first begin, go to File. And if you have something that you already had open, fine. If not, go to New. And then this dialog box comes up and it asks you whether you want to create a blank document or use a document template. I very rarely use document templates uh, stored in the Vectorworks um, file system. I'm sure you can, just not my thing. Um, so if I do have a document template, I just save it as a regular Vectorworks file and I open it from there. Otherwise, I just create a blank document. Quite frankly, it's so easy to set up the document. It only takes a few minutes. It's so easy. Sometimes I just start a new document. So anyway, here we go. Create a new document. Click OK. Many of you, when you first start out, will come up with this uh, on your screen. And what this is this is a page outline in this gray, and then the blue is the grid um, that is inherent to Vectorworks. This grid relates back to down here when you have your snap points on. If you go to use a line or a polyline or whatever, this will snap to the grids that are here. I'm going to take that off. I don't really use that. As a matter of fact, what I'd like to do is set up this document. But let's take a look first at the organization panel, okay? So there's several ways to get there. One is to find the icon for layers or classes and double click on it as such, okay? Or you can come to tools and go to organization, and it'll open up the same panel for you. And you can see right across the top there's classes, design layers, sheet layers, viewports, save views, and references. Very rarely do I refer back to these three: viewports, save views, and references. I try to keep these things to a minimum. References deals with if you do not actually import an image, you only reference it. It keeps a list of those. You save views. If you save a view, it'll ask you um, this dialog box that asks you certain questions, and then the answers wind up here. And viewports, the same thing. It'll keep a record of all your viewports. But today we're just going to talk about these three tabs right here: sheet layers, design layers, and classes. So a class in Vectorworks is the grouping of an element. For instance, an existing property line would have one class. Existing structure would have a class. Existing contour would have a class. Actually, you could have that as two classes. One is existing contour minor, and one is existing contour major. Okay? You design classes, design layer rather, design layer would have, these are the actual layers, and these would be the big categories. For instance, existing and proposed. Okay, I normally keep the layers to a minimum, and I get quite detailed with the classes. The reason I do that is if I'm trying to find a particular element and it's a confusing drawing, if it was existing, I know it's on the existing layer. If it's proposed, I know it's on the proposed layer. I do also create an import layer, meaning I'll import a survey, or sometimes I call it survey or something like that. But I try to keep these layers to a minimum. Okay. And then my sheet layers, the design is where you actually design. And the sheet layer is your sheet that you're going to print, the actual paper that you're going to print. I never print from the design layer. I only print from the sheet layer. Okay. All right. So on my design layer, um, it's default that design layer 1 comes up. And if you want to create a new one, for instance, in this case, I'm going to create new. I come right down here to new, and it opens up this dialog box, new design layer, and it's going to now ask me some questions. Do I want to create a new design layer, and what do I want that name to be? Or am I going to import a design layer from some other document? Okay. Once again, I very rarely use the layers that are stored in the Vectorworks files. I can either create my own, or I can, I can create a new one very simply, or I can import a layer from somewhere else. It's very simple to just create a new layer. So in this one, I'm going to create import, and I always click on the edit properties after creation. I try to do the same exact routine every single time. Makes it very simple. Click OK, and that opens up now my edit design layer panel. And the name is going to be import. My scale, I almost always leave the scale at 1 to 1. You could change the scale if you wanted to. Okay. And I'll go through this here. And you'll be seeing this quite a bit through Vectorworks. You can change the scales very quickly and easily. I always leave it at 1 to 1 for the import. Just makes it easier. It's the same system that I use over and over again. If for some reason you want to change the scale, it's very simple. You can either pick one of the imperial scales that are predetermined here already. For instance, 1 inch equals 10 feet. Or you can pick one of the metric engineering scales. For instance, 1 to 10. Now, what this does is changes your scale in what your paper scale is. Paper scale means on your piece of paper, what is the scale going to be? Or on your layer, your sheet layer or your design layer, what is your scale going to be? So you can see I have up here 1 to 10, meaning 1 foot equals 10 feet, is represented right here. 1 foot equals 10 feet. If I was to choose an imperial scale of 1/8 inch equals 1 foot, what this means is 1 inch equals 8 feet. 8 feet is 96 inches. Okay. And you can see that this is now represented here. 1 inch equals 96 inches. All right. So anytime you change this, anytime you change either one into choosing one of these predetermined scales, this area is automatically updated. If you have something that you need a custom scale, for instance, 1 to 200 is a little bit big, and 1 to 500 is a little bit small, you can choose a custom scale. And what you would do is click right here. Now you can see there's no other thing chosen up here. This is now going to override any other thing that's here, any other choice that's here. And you can make your own custom scale, for instance, 1 to 250. And now that will be the scale on the layer that you're working on. If you change the scale, I recommend you click all layers so that everything follows the same way, and scale text. If you happen to have some text in there, it should scale it correctly. Sometimes the text boxes uh, have a different configuration. You have to go in and readjust the text boxes, but any other text that's there will scale correctly. But I'm going to leave this at the 1-to-1 because that's the way I like to do it. And I click OK. The next thing that's here is the stacking order. And what this means is where, in this, you can see right here is the panel, where is the import layer going to reside? Should it be on top of the design layer or should it be below the design layer? Try to think of this as one thing is you're laying pieces of trace paper one on top of the other. And what do you want on the bottom and what do you want on the top? So in this case, my import, I actually want to be on the bottom. So I'm going to change this to 2 right now. I can easily change this right in the panel, and I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. The next thing that's here is what is the elevation going to be? Normally, this is if you have a base elevation, and normally this would be for a building, for instance. Your bottom floor is going to be at, let's say, 51.2 feet. You would type that in here. Then you don't have to raise it up each time. It automatically will go to 51.2 feet. But we're not going to build a building, so I'm not going to bother with that. The same with this layer wall height. What this means is on this particular layer, what if you draw a wall, what is the default wall height? And again, this is really more to do with a building. You can easily change it. You can override what the default is. But we're not building a building here, so I'm going to leave that at 0. The next is the opacity. And right now I want it to be 100. Again, this can easily be overridden in the attributes panel if you need to later on. The next question is RenderWorks background. Well, we're only going to be dealing with wireframe, so we don't need RenderWorks, so we're not going to bother with anything going on there. The colors, these are the default colors, black and white. That's fine for what we want to do. The save views, we already went through that. That was over here. Same with the viewports, so we're not going to bother with that. And the last item here is geo-reference. You can check this box off if you're going to have whatever you are drawing to be geo-referenced. What this means is in real-world data files, for instance, GIS files, you can create a design and have it assume the data for real-world coordinates, meaning longitude, latitude, that type of thing. You would have to have started with a georeference file, which we're not going to do here, so I'm going to leave this unchecked. At a later date, I will cover GIS files and georeferenced Vectorworks files. Anyway, so just to recap, my name is going for this layer, this design layer is going to be import. My scale is going to be 1-to-1, and I'm going to have it stacked second in my 2 layers here. So I click OK. And it gives you this little dialog box. You can easily check this. Did you know you can change the layer stacking order by using the drag and drop on the organization dialog? I will show you this momentarily. Okay. Now I'm going to create another new layer called existing. And same thing, I'm going to edit the properties after creation, click OK. The name is going to be existing. My scale is going to be 1-to-1. I'm going to put it as 1 for now so that I can show you how to easily change it. Same thing, my elevation I'm not going to bother with. My layer wall height, I'm not going to bother. My opacity, I'm going to leave it 100. I don't need RenderWorks. My colors will take the default. I don't have any save views. I don't have any viewports, and I don't want it to be georeferenced, so I click OK. And now my existing is on the top. Now, let's say I decide that I actually want the design layer 1 to be on top of the existing. Think back to the pieces of trace paper. My import, my survey, I want to be on the bottom. And then on top, I'm going to put one piece of trace paper on top of that, which I'm going to draw in the existing elements that I need. And then on top of that, I'm going to put another piece of trace paper that is going to be my design or proposed. So I actually want my existing to be underneath the design layer. I can easily just come here. If I just hover over, this is the stacking order. If I want to just hover over here, you can see it has that funny little icon there. And I just click down and hold it and drag down the layer I want to move. You can see now that the import is on the bottom the way we wanted. The existing, which had been number 1, is now number 2. And my design layer is on the top. And that's how I would like to have it. Okay, now let's move over to my classes. Okay. Now by default, there's a dimension class and the none class. Many designers start with these two. They put everything in none, and then they reassign later on. You can easily do that, or it's very simple to just create some classes as you go. So many of you that have taken my class know one thing I like to do is have a separate trace class in which I trace over all the elements that I want from my survey and put it into my trace layer. Now, the reason I do that is I choose a color that I would never use in a design, which is a very bright red. And I use a thick line. And then I can easily see, even if the survey is a confusing document, I can easily see what I have traced over so I don't forget things that I need. And I can ignore the things that I don't need. I'll have a quick little show of how that works. So I create a trace layer, a trace class. And then after that, I start assigning attributes to other elements. For instance, my existing property line, my existing structure, my existing contours, and all that type of thing. So let me just create a few of those right now, and I'll show you how to do that. You click New, and then this brings up the dialog box of New Class, and I want to create a new class. And you can see this is the same as with the layers. You can import a class from a different saved Vectorworks file, but it's very simple to create your own. So I'm just going to create my layer of trace. And the same thing that I've done before, I have the edit properties after creation selected. And now that brings up another dialog box for me that is now going to be, what are my attributes for this class going to be? So the name is trace. I always click user creation so I can see what I'm doing. Now for this particular class, I do not want any fill. So I'm going to click none here. Okay. And my pen, I want to be solid. But my color, I want it to be a brilliant red. So let me pick it right here. And I want it to be fairly thick. So I'm going to pick 0.7 so I can easily see it. And the line is going to be continuous or solid, not dotted or dashed or anything like that. My opacity, I want it to be 100%. Now, the next thing I have here is textures. Now, textures are only used when you have 3D objects. So we're not going to have that here. Now, it's hard to see right now, but all I'm going to do is just click OK. Next, I want to start a new class of, that's going to be existing property line. And there's a little bit of a naming technique here. First, I put existing, and then I put a dash. When I put a dash in this naming technique, it will now group together all of the existing elements together. So for instance, I have existing property line. I'm just going to simplify that as PL. Same thing as before, edit properties after creation. I click OK. And same thing on this one, use at creation. On this one, I do not want any fill. I'm going to leave this, I'm actually going to have it dashed. I am going to have it black, but I don't want it at 0.05. I probably want it to be 0.5. And the other thing is, I don't want it to have this dash. I want to have long dash double dotted. That's what I use for property line. I do want it to be 100% opacity. I am not going to have it as a texture. And I just push enter, which is the same as OK. The next thing I do is another new class. And I'm going to put existing dash, because I want it to be grouped together. I'm going to put in structure. Same as before, edit properties after creation, use at creation. Now my structure, I do want to give it some color. So I am going to keep it solid. And then I'm going to open up this color box to choose the color that I want. So let's take a look at some of the choices that are in the lower section right here. First, if you choose active document, these are the colors that are currently in the active document. You can see there's just white, black, and red, which is correct. If you choose the classic Vectorworks color tab, these are the original colors that were in Vectorworks. Then there's the standard Vectorworks colors. They actually expanded it, and you can see there's a little more shading going on here. And you can see it's a pretty nice selection. And then I have some others here. And how did I get some of these other ones? For instance, this pastel coded or this go coded. How did I get those colors? Well, all you do is come down to this little tiny arrow here, and that's your utility menu, as you can see. And they give you, you click that once, and it gives you some choices about this particular panel. So the first one is, do you want to view the color as a grid or as a list? So let's put list so you can see what that looks like, okay? And you can see it's a whole list with the colors there, okay? But I'm going to leave it as a grid. And then you can sort the color palette manually or by color. Okay, now they group all the same colors together, or ascending alphabetical or descending. And then place the color palettes, meaning these buttons right here are the color palettes. Do you want them on the bottom as they are now? Or if you choose it on the top, you can see it jumps up to the top. Okay. And then the last choice you have is shrink grid to fit. I don't really know what that means because I've never used it before. Now, where did I get this Pantone pastel coated and this other Pantone Go uncoated? So up in this section right here, you have some choice. The first is if you're good at picking from a color wheel, you can pick from here and choose whatever color it is you want from the color wheel. And then if it's a blue, for instance, it'll go up and down depending on how dark you want to get it. Okay. Then if you have some colors that you really like, for instance, let's say this lime green type color, you can place them in this. Um, you just click once, drag it down, and drop it right in there. And now that color is available to you. You don't have to try to remember exactly where it was on the color wheel. You can just come here and pick it, and it will automatically jump to there. Okay. Or if this purpley color, it would automatically jump there. Okay. Also in here is the slider. Uh, this is a gray slider. You can have the red, green, blue sliders to really get precise if you're good at that. This is your typical palette. Um, apples. This is on a Mac, so they have apples, they have developer, they have crayons, and they have web safe colors. Okay. You can also have images from a spectrum. Okay. You can pick anywhere in here. This is similar to the color wheel. And you can have the typical crayon. And the same deal, they have this nice little panel here. So if this is a color that you happen to use a lot, you can just come and drag it and put it right here. Okay. Just drag it from the top and drop it right in there. Okay. All right. The other thing that they have is this little preference button. It's called your color palette manager. You can click on that, and this gives you some preloaded paint colors. Um, what's nice about this is if you use this, let's say you had something very specific, you're working on somebody's house, and you want them to change the color of the door or the trim, or they have a shed. You're going to propose a shed, and you want it to be a particular color because it's important to your design. Okay, you can go ahead and pick one of the colors here. And what's nice about this is when it does come time for them to paint whatever the element is that you want them to change, they can go to the Benjamin Moore store and tell them, I need pale pink satin, um, because that's the color that you chose there. They have quite a few different colors, or Pantone is another paint, Pittsburgh paint you people have heard of, Sherwin-Williams, all these types of things. And what you do to choose them so that they're in your color selection tools, you can just check it off. So these Munsell colors, if I want to make sure it's in that panel, I just click and I click OK. And when I come back to the color palette, you can see that the Munsell colors is now available to me. And again, these are all named. It gives you what the details are in case you have to reproduce this somewhere else. It's pretty handy. But most of the time, I just use the standard colors, um, and I usually view them as a list. Okay. And there's plenty of, you can see there's more than enough colors for you to choose from here. Okay, so let's see. I want the, in case we forgot what we're doing, I'm dealing with the existing structure, and I'm giving it some attributes, and I want the fill to be solid, and I'm going to want it to be, let's see, probably a nice sort of a tan color. So let me see what I have. I like this little avocado. Okay, but I don't want it to really be that brilliant, so I'm going to actually tone it down a little bit, maybe to 85%. And what this does is it changes the opacity of this, tone it down a little bit. I am going to leave the solid color on it, and I'm going to leave it at 0.05 for now. Certainly, I can, depending on what I want it to look like, I may bump this up if it's because it's something important, to maybe 0.5. in some cases, you can actually draw the walls, especially if you know where the windows are. You can draw the walls and drop the windows in. And for two things. One is then you're remembering where the windows are on your particular uh, subject property structure. Um, and also, it gives a nice representation. But for now, I'm just going to represent the existing structure with a solid outer wall and a fill of this avocado type color. I'm not going to build it in 3D, so I don't need any textures. And I'm going to push enter, the same as having it clicking OK. All right. And I'm going to click OK. That's all I really need for now. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is this is my active layer is existing. Now, when I draw, I do not use the grid, and I don't use the paper that is associated with this because I'm at a 1-to-1 scale. I never print from the design layer, so I don't need a piece of paper here. So to avoid any confusion, what I can do is the first thing I want to do is come into File, Document Settings, and come down to Document Setup. And this gives me another dialog box. And the first thing I'm going to deal with is my drawing units. What are my drawing units going to be? So typically in landscape, it's going to be feet and inches. But I could change that if I needed to. It can be just inches or feet. If it's a really big project, miles. If it's really small, centimeters, meters. It can be kilometers. It can be degrees. This would be the unit type that you're going to use. The next item here is your rounding style. How do you want it rounded? Did you want it fractional? Did you want it decimal? Or whichever comes up, you can have it as both. As far as the fractional goes, how do you want it to appear? For instance, 1/4. Do you want it to look this way on a diagonal, or one on top of the other? And that's a personal preference as long as it is consistent through the document. The next item here is the rounding precision. How precise do you want this to be? Typically in landscape, 1/8 is kind of small. Maybe on a detail you would use this, but normally you could have it as 1/2 or no fraction. I'm going to pick no fraction for now. And my decimal precision, 0.001 is pretty small. Typically, you don't really get too much more precise than the 10th place. So I'm just going to put it as 0.1. And your decimal rounding base, this means closest to what? It can be closest to 1, 2.5, or 5. So 1 is normal. And your decimal options, if you need leading or trailing zeros, you would check off right here. The next area that we're going to deal with, ironically, is called area. And do you want your units of area to be square feet, square inches, square miles, whatever? I'm going to leave it as square feet. And what's my precision? I am just going to leave it at a whole number. That's as close as I need. Now the next little area here is going to be dealing with volume, and this is only when you are going to be talking about 3D. We're only going to talk about 2D right here, so I'm going to leave it alone. I don't need to do anything there. And the last little area is the angle, and what unit do I want to use? Degrees, radians, or gradients? I'm going to use degrees. And how precise do I want this to be? Typically, I don't need it to be this precise. I typically just have the whole number. And I click OK. And now that was all just for this first drawing unit. The next is my layer scale here, and it's at 1-to-1. That's what I want it to be, so I'm going to leave it. My drawing area, what that means is where is it I'm going to draw? So I actually don't want to show the page boundary. So I'm just going to click that off for now. And I'm not going to print from here, so I don't need to set this up. And I click OK. And you can see right here that the paper is gone and the grid extends. Well, I can't show you right now, but the grid extends into infinity. The next area is talking about those grids. And right now my grid lines are on. You can see right here, they're easily on. And I want to change that. And this opens up my cursor setting panel. And the category I want to deal with is grid. So I click there. And here you can set up a grid if you think you need it. Typically, this would be if you're drawing something that is square or rectangle, anything with sharp corners. I really am not going to be dealing with that, so I'm actually going to take that off. You could show the grid and print the grid. The grid, if you print it, sometimes it has a nice appearance to it. But I'm going to leave that off, and I'm going to also turn off the show grid. My reference grid I don't need, and we're not going to deal with 3D, so I don't really need to bother with that. Some of the other categories that are here are general, and this is dealing with the snap points. I usually leave them in the default. Another thing is the object. What snap points do you want to show on the object? This is what the default is. I usually leave them all on. This deals with your angles. What angle do you want to deal with? So this is the default. I usually leave that. You can rotate the plan. I usually don't recommend that. There are other ways to get around it. One of your snapping options is your smart point. This is what is default, and I usually leave those on. The last thing is a smart edge. I really don't use it, so I don't do anything to it. And this is the distance, which has to do with another one of the snap points. I don't use it, so I leave it. And I click OK. And you can see that now there are no grid lines showing. The last area in this section is the georeferencing, which I am not going to use, so I'll just leave that off as it is now. The next section here deals with the sheet border and title block. Well, I'm not going to print from here, so I don't need a sheet border, so I'm going to leave it as none. And then I'm going to click OK. Okay, and then there you have it. The existing layer at 1:1. You have your active classes with dimension, which was default. You can see because I had my naming sequence with existing dash that the existing items are grouped together. None that was default, and trace. And you're ready to begin your import and begin your drawing. Okay, I'll continue with how to import on a different video, and we'll see you soon. Bye.